There are so many options when picking your macrame cord for a project, and I'd really like to try and help you make that decision process a little easier. There are 3 things to think about when picking your macrame cord. The first thing to choose is whether you use rope, cord, or string. What is the difference between all these 3? Because you are going to hear all of them in the macrame world. In my tutorials, I almost always say macrame cord, but honestly, that isn't necessarily correct. String is one type, and it can be single strand, it can be single twisted cotton string, or more often you're going to hear single strand cotton cord. It really doesn't matter. This is what cotton string looks like. So it's made of several strands twisted together, but I always refer to it as macrame cord or single strand cord. The key word to look for when purchasing this kind of cord is single. Single strand twisted, single strand cotton cord. Single is the key word, but you can always tell just by looking at it in the photo. Here you can see that single is in the description. If you're purchasing your cord online, always look at the picture before you purchase, because after this tutorial, you'll be able to tell the difference between the 3. Cord, in its proper definition, is braided and looks tube-like. So what you'll hear is braided macrame cord, and that's pretty much across the board. Braided cord doesn't fray at the ends, and often it's a little bit stretchy, and some are stretchier than others. Rope is 3 strands that are twisted together, which makes it the strongest of all 3 types. You'll hear this described as 3-ply cotton twisted rope, or just 3-ply twisted rope, or 3-ply rope. Regardless, you can see how it's 3 strands twisted together. It can be 2-ply, which is 2 cords, or 3-ply, which is 3 cords, 4-ply, but 3-ply is the most common. Now you may be wondering which is the right cord to use for your project. Well, let's start with single strand cord. It looks softer, it's softer to the touch, it also lays more flat. This cord is the easiest to comb out, so it's really great for feathers and for fringe, and it also gives that boho look if you're looking for that vibe for your projects, which I really love, so it's the cord I use the most. 3-ply twisted cord, because it's a stronger cord, is better for things like plant hangers. But don't let that discourage you from using single strand, because I do it all the time. 3-ply gives more structure and definition to the knots. When you unravel this cord, it gives a nice wavy or even crimped look. If you don't want your cord to unravel while you're doing your project, I suggest you tape the ends. I made these 2 identical wall hangings, one with 3-ply twisted and one with single strand, so you can see the difference for yourself. You can see how the single strand looks softer, it lays flatter, it just has more of a boho feel to it. And then the 3-ply, you can see the more structure and definition to the knots and to the whole pattern itself. Braided cord is both soft and it gives that more defined look to your knots. It holds its structure really well, so it's great for projects that have a lot of wear and tear, like bags or purses. The second thing to consider when picking your cord is the thickness of the material itself. Cord thicknesses range from 1 millimeter to 10 millimeter and beyond. When picking your cord thickness, you also have to think of the thing which is the third key, which is the project you're going to make. There are certain projects you probably wouldn't make with 1 millimeter or 2 millimeter cord, and other projects you wouldn't make with 8 millimeter or 10 millimeter cord. So that's why these 2 kind of go hand in hand. I mean, all 3 of them go together, but 2 and 3 are very much dependent on each other. The most common thickness of cord is 3 millimeter and 4 millimeter. For the first 2 years, almost every project I made was made with 4 millimeter cord. Now I lean more to 5 mil or 6 mil even, because I like that chunkier look to my projects. Let me explain a little more when you would use certain thicknesses of cord. And remember, there are no hard fast rules, so it really depends on the look you're going for the project you're making. 1 and 2 millimeter cord are usually used for jewelry, like earrings or bracelets. If you were making a wall hanging and you used 1 or 2 millimeter cord, it would take forever to make because the knots are so tiny. I don't really think anyone would do it unless you're making a really small, almost like a miniature wall hanging. When you use thinner cord, it's smaller knots. The thicker the cord, the bigger the knot. and the quicker the project will work up. When using a thinner cord, you're making more knots to fill the same space as a thicker cord. Thinner cord gives you more detail, and thicker cord, especially the really thick cord, looks a bit chunkier. The biggest thing to consider is how big you want your project to be. If you're making a really massive wall hanging, don't even use 3 or 4 millimeter cord. I mean, you can, but it's going to take so long to make it. I would suggest using 6 mil or 8 mil, or maybe even 10 mil. It depends how big you're going. But 3 and 4 mil are the most common for just a standard typical wall hanging. You'd be surprised though how many more knots you have to do just doing 3 mil instead of the 4 mil. It's really the style that you develop that's going to determine what cord you like to use the most. At some point, there's going to be one size cord or one type of cord that you start using for most of your projects. If you're making a project from a pattern or from a YouTube tutorial, I highly suggest you use the same thickness of cord that's used in that tutorial. That thickness determines the width and the length of the project, and they're also basing the cut lengths on that cord thickness. If you decide to use a different thickness of cord, you're going to have to adjust the cut lengths of the cord for that project. If you use thicker cord, you'll need your lengths to be longer, and if you use thinner cords, you'll need your lengths to be shorter. And that conversation I'm going to save for a different tutorial. If you're designing your own project and you're having a hard time determining your cut lengths, watch this tutorial next. Let me know in the comments below if you have any questions.